Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals. Today, we are going to be raging against the faxing of the brass and talking about the Elcan DR 1-4. Before we get into that, the algorithm demands a sacrifice. Now, full disclosure on the Elcan is that I have no affiliation with Raytheon other than I think their propaganda movies are neato. This optic was sent in to me by a kind viewer of the channel because I would never spend $2,500 on something like this. Getting into the basics of the Elcan, we have the trolley problem of magnification. Would you like no eye relief and 4x magnification, or would you like some eye relief and no magnification? You can throw the lever as many times as you want. The only person who dies in this situation is that happy person you were 5 minutes ago. For size and weight, we have a short 6-inch body made out of mostly aluminum and some steel components. Weight comes in at a hefty 23.5 ounces. Starting out with the body, we have a 32mm objective lens, top-mounted iron sights that are basically an emergency option only. The actual owner of this optic also sprung for the RMR plate that also mounts to the top that gives you another backup option. On the left-hand side of the body, we have our illumination dial, which has two modes. The full reticle, which doesn't get very bright, but it does again illuminate the entire reticle, or just the center dot, which does get daylight bright. Very interesting on the Elcan is that the battery life out of a single 2032 is actually really good, for a non-red dot that is. About 400 to 600 hours on max for the two different illumination modes, which means that you get weeks, if not longer, depending on how you're managing your brightness, and that is much better than what you'll see on like an LPVO. Getting into another strong suit for the Elcan is going to be your field of view. Probably the best out of any optic out there. At 1x, it's rated for 148 feet at 100 yards, which is massive, and at 4x, you're rated at about 45 feet, which again is basically best in class. There might only be one other optic out there that has it beat at a higher magnification. And now all that is great on paper, but when we get to the sacrifices to achieve that field of view, we get the usability. And I kind of hate this thing. It has the shortest eye relief I have ever seen for a 1x optic, bar none, but you have a huge field of view, you say. Well, too bad it's taken up by the whole body then, huh? At 4x, the trade-off is maybe more worth it because you do get a large magnified image. However, the horrible eye relief and the body still takes up a huge chunk of your peripheral vision, so I'll leave it up to you whether or not you think that's worth it. This is easily one of, if not the worst viewing experiences on a magnified rifle, and I test a lot of budget optics. Now, talking about the glass itself, it looks good, but not as good as other high-end options. I've had the pleasure of using it alongside ACOGs and the PLXC, and both of those look better to my eyes. Now, there is some subjectivity there, and that's not to say that the glass is bad, it's just not quite as good as other options that are considerably cheaper. Moving on to the reticle, I actually think this is set up pretty well. It might be a little too thick for some applications, but for a 4x optic, it's certainly not bad. In the center, you have a floating dot that is thick enough to pick up quickly, and especially with the good illumination, though again, it is bold even without it. Now, below that, we have our BDC, which is good out to about 600 meters for more precise shooting. And below that, we have area of fire circles for machine gunners all the way out to 1,000 yards. Now, if you did want to take a more precise shot with this out to about 700 meters, you're kind of out of luck, but it's pretty hard to do that with 4x anyways. Also in the glass, we do have some auto ranging features. In the bottom left, we have some height ranging, and I believe we also have width down the BDC, so it kind of has all the features you want. The main complaint is going to be that it's a little bit too thick for some applications. Now let's talk about the mount. The optic body does not have any windage or elevation. That is because the zero adjustments are done through the mount itself. Up front, we have our windage dial that physically shifts the optic body left and right. Fair enough. In the back, we have our elevation dial that needs to be unlocked before you can rotate it to adjust zero, and then you can lock it back in place. Now, I have heard of these losing zero when they get dirty, but I don't know how dirt could shift a locked dial, but maybe there's something else going on there. Talking about how it mounts to a rifle, you have two QD levers that twist the steel locking pieces into your receiver or rail. On the bottom, you also have a recoil lug, which helps to create more contact between the mount and your rifle, and also provides a hard stop during recoil. The problem is the geniuses at Raytheon didn't design any adjustment into the mount. So, because of that, it doesn't fit on certain setups. I have some billet uppers that it simply doesn't lock onto. It just slides back and forth. So maybe I could shim it with some aluminum foil or some other ghetto setup, but for a $2,500 optic, kind of ridiculous. And if you have, say, a rail that's maybe a little too big, like the Jackal, you might have to mallet it onto the rifle. But that is, again, a separate issue. Basically, if you try to mount this to something that isn't perfectly sized, oddball uppers, AKs, if you wanted to try that sort of thing, or other non-AR rifles, good luck on your $2,500 brick. Oh, did I also mention that there is no adjustable diopter, so if your eyes aren't good enough to pick up the reticle and make it not blurry, better luck next time, I guess. Now, the biggest defining feature of the Elcan is, of course, the dual roll, meaning you have that lazy Susan dual prism setup on the inside that gives you a 1x and a 4x solution. So talking about them on their own without the usability quibbles aside, the 1x looks very good. Again, you have a monstrous field of view that a lot of that is taken up by the optic body and your rifle a lot of the times, especially if you're using a laser aiming module, it's going to take up about 30% of your glass. On 1x, again, it looks very good. You do have a daylight bright dot to use, so there's a lot to like at 1x in theory, although I find myself liking almost any other 1x solution where the body doesn't take up so much of your actual field of view out of your actual eyes. So while it's big on paper in effect because your eye is so close to it, and again, the body is just kind of thicker, it's not all that nice to actually use. On 4x, you do have a very big magnified image, which is nice, but again, the short eye relief, mediocre usability, and the fact the glass doesn't look as good as other options that are half the weight, half the cost, it's not really doing it that many favors. I think that there are some things that it does really well, but overall, it's just kind of outclassed by everything else on the market. There is not a single time so far that I have swapped from this optic to another and not been overjoyed to not be using an Elcan any longer. So I think the Elcan would be a killer optic at $500. At $1,000, I kind of hate it. And at $2,500, that's some serious tism you got there, sir. But with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you think of the Elcan in the comments down below. I am sure there are plenty of defenders out there, but that's about it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.